Hey everyone, today I want to talk about similar accounts that predate the writing of the book of Genesis. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. It appears lately that some people are losing their faith in the Tanakh because they say that they have seen evidence that what is recorded in the book of Genesis has been recorded elsewhere many years prior to the scriptural accounts that we have in the Torah. So this has led them to believe that the Torah was just copied from older belief systems and thereby that somehow it invalidates the Torah. So let's look at this issue a little bit closer today. Genesis 1:1 states, "In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth." Is that the oldest verse we have in the Tanakh? No, it isn't. Actually, it's believed by scholars that the book of Job was written first, and it's the oldest. Yet Job is number 18 in order of the way that the books in the Tanakh are assembled. At least that's how we have it in most of our Bibles today. Now, if you do a search for a timeline of biblical figures, most agree that Moses was born around 1500 BCE. And these figures are just kind of generic, kind of like right in the middle of what everyone thinks. But most people agree that Moses was born around 1500 BCE. The Great Flood was around 2500 BCE, and that Adam's creation was around the year 4000 BCE. So if we go all the way back to Adam, this was 2500 years before Moses was even born. So for those people who think that Genesis is merely a copy of what other civilizations did or what they taught from what they recorded, do we really think that nobody in those 2,500 years would have written a single thing about world events before Moses wrote the Torah, or at least wrote the book of Genesis? Nowhere in any of the accounts in the book of Genesis does it state, this is the first time this is being told or even written. Most likely, Abraham's ancestors passed down some of the same information that we can find that Moses wrote later in the book of Genesis. Obviously, something was being handed down, right? If he was righteous and he was passing that down, some of that stuff was known orally or was written down and recorded before Moses put it in the Torah. But did you ever play the game of telephone where one person whispers something into one person's ear and that person whispers it to the next person and it goes all the way around the room, and what's finally told to the last person is almost unrecognizable from what was said to the first person? That same type of thing would happen through time with oral historical accounts. They would morph and they would switch, and some people would add a little bit of stuff to it, or some people would take a little bit away, not trying to be malicious, but just how they remembered them. Why do we think Elohim had Moses write the book of Genesis? Let's just take Genesis, for example, without thinking of the rest of the Torah. I bet it was to get down what actually happened and straight from the mouth of Elohim. So doing that would take all of the worldly stories and the errors, all the things that were added or subtracted to it from time, completely out of the way. So it would be the straight truth from Elohim. When Moses went up the mountain to receive the tablets from Elohim, it is recorded that he was up there for 40 days. Now, do we really think it took Elohim 40 days to write what he did on those two tablets on both sides? I seriously doubt it. So what was Moses doing for the rest of that time? We're going to address that shortly. But let's hear what happened just prior to that, of what is written in Exodus 24, 3-4. "And Moses came and related to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the right rulings. And all the people answered and said with one voice, all the words which Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. And Moses wrote down all the words of Yahweh." So here, Moses is writing the Torah. He's written down everything that Elohim has spoken, because it says, "And Moses came and related to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the right rulings." So Moses had all that written down. So Moses is writing the Torah. He's written down everything that Elohim has said at this point. I just want to make that clear. Exodus 24:7 also tells us, "And he took the book of the covenant What Moses had been writing, as there were no stone tablets at this point in time, and Moses read it within the hearing of the people. And they said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do and obey. Yahweh submitted the proposal, the people accepted, and this was prior to any stone tablets handed to Moses. But Moses had been writing the book of the covenant, or the Torah. And then, once Moses was up on the mountain with Elohim, this was recorded in Exodus 34:27. And Yahweh said to Moses, write these words, for according to the mouth of these words I have made a covenant with you and with Yisrael. So did you catch that? Elohim told Moses to write down these words, the Torah. And then we also have in Exodus 34:28. And he was there with Yahweh 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat bread and he did not drink water. And he, or Elohim, wrote on the tablets the word of the covenant, the 10 words. Yahweh wrote the tablets and Moses wrote the Torah, what we have come to know as Genesis through most of the book of Deuteronomy. This is very important to realize. The Torah that Moses wrote was a witness to what Elohim wrote. Because remember, the 2 tablets were placed inside the Ark of the Covenant, and we're told that the book of Torah was to be placed next to it as a witness to us. All right, let's switch gears as we consider a couple of verses, starting with Genesis 6:9. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Genesis 26:5, where Elohim said, because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torah. And we know what the definition of righteousness is, as we're told in Deuteronomy 6:25. And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahweh our Elohim, as he has commanded us. So wait a minute. Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy approximately 1,500 years after Noah's day and approximately 500 years after Abraham's time. Yet we're told that Noah was a righteous man, so obviously he kept the commands of Elohim. And Elohim outright told Isaac that his father Abraham kept his Torah. He kept all of it. So the Torah was obviously well known before it was re-given to the people by Elohim through Moses on Mount Sinai. So here is just 2 examples of people keeping the Torah commands before the Torah commands were even written in the Torah. And this is so important for people to understand that here we have historical accounts of the Torah being kept before the Torah had been recorded by Moses. I just read an article online about something called the Epic of Gilgamesh. These are writings, or mostly poems, from Mesopotamia, which is now modern-day Iraq, which contain a couple of the same accounts and stories we can find in the Hebrew Bible that was written long before the Hebrew Bible. Of the many different stories, possibly the best known is probably the account of the Great Flood, which reads very similarly to the account in Genesis of Noah's flood. Science today has different methods for dating historical artifacts. While science can teach us a lot, we need to remember that a lot of their scientific dating methods are not always reliable. A lot of people working to date these artifacts and texts, they believe in evolution instead of creation, and they may refer to many of these things they're discovering or reading as things like the flood myth and that type of thing. So we need to understand that they specifically and purposely lean away from a biblical understanding and time frame. Now, while the Epic of Gilgamesh also includes stories which bear some similarities to the Hebrew Bible, most do not. Some people draw some fairly crude parallels between the stories, but most of this epic doesn't sound much like the Hebrew Bible at all. So some of it does, some of it doesn't. There are many partial bits and pieces of it. I think there's like 12 main parts to it, and of those, they don't have all of them. They have big sections of them, and then there's other rewrites and pieces that were found scattered in different areas, and I think one of the most modern rewrites comes from the 7th century BCE, if I'm correct about that. But if we put aside this whole Epic of Gilgamesh, there are actually hundreds of other archaeological discoveries that verify and corroborate scriptural history. The Great Flood, the Exodus, King David, and many other people and events that are described in the Bible are proven to be accurate by non-biblical sources. And why wouldn't we think that others would have written about these people and events? That would be insane to think that nobody else would have written about it. Because there are other accounts or stories about the events in people in Torah that are extra biblical or date even earlier than the time of Moses, well, that would make perfect sense, and it would seem extremely illogical if we didn't have those accounts. In that time span from creation to Moses' time, we would fully expect there to be many other accounts, right? 2,500 years. There's probably a lot still out there waiting to be found. In all honesty, these other accounts add credibility to the Torah, not that we need it, but they do not invalidate it in any way. They add credibility to it. So, was the book of Genesis compiled from many older accounts? When Moses went up the mountain to receive the tablets from Elohim, it is recorded that he was up there for 40 days. Do we really think it took Elohim 40 days to write what he did on those 2 tablets? I seriously doubt it. So what was Moses doing for the rest of the time? Just watching? Moses was actually writing the Torah as Elohim instructed, something that would take Moses many, many days to handwrite. Think of all the genealogies in the Torah. Look at how detailed and comprehensive all that information is. How could anybody have all that information recorded correctly without it being told to them by Elohim? How would anybody know what happened at creation? And so on and so forth, unless Elohim set the record straight by giving it to Moses. Genesis and the other books of Torah were given directly to Moses by Elohim, and Moses wrote it all down so Elohim would have all generations know the truth. Well, I hope this video blessed you. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Shalom to all who are Yisrael and are scattered worldwide in the dispersion. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.